18, where we are discussing nutrition and metabolism. This is video 2. So last video, we actually ended up on this slide, but I want to do a quick recap on some of the things on this slide. So lipids are not a primary energy source that our body uses, but the body can use lipids as an energy source, which is why our bodies store fat, right? Because that is that potential energy that we can use later on if we need it and if we run out of glucose and glycogen. Lipids that our body take in. If we don't have the right kind of lipids, if we're not eating the right kind of lipids, then our liver can take the lipids that we do have and convert it from one type to another if necessary. But that's not all lipids. That's not all fatty acids that can be converted from one to the other. Some are considered essential fatty acids. And just like before, when we saw essential in front of a term, it basically means that these things must come from the diet. Our bodies cannot make them. Our bodies cannot convert one thing into them because we don't have the right enzymes. We don't have basically the right machinery to be able to do that. Now, there are these substances called lipoproteins, and as the name suggests, these are lipids that are attached to proteins. When we talk about lipoproteins, many of the lipoproteins will have a lot to do with our overall health, and certain diseases because these proteins are attached to lipids. When you talk about lipoproteins, oftentimes we'll refer to them based on their density. How much do they weigh? How heavy are they? How much mass they contain. And the amount of mass they contain depends on the ratio between how much fatty acid and how much protein is attached to a molecule. And for each molecule, that differs. So, first thing is keep in mind that the proteins are used to help transport lipids throughout the body to target cells. Remember when we talked about blood, we said that oil and water don't mix. So plasma is made up of primarily water. And lipid, of course, is fat. You pour some fat on water or lipid onto water, oil on water, all of those are the same thing, right? The oil will float. But if you take a piece of meat and you put it in some water and it's going to sink, the meat, the protein is much more dense than the lipid. So if you have a lipoprotein that has more lipid than protein, then it's going to be much less dense. It's going to be lighter than if you had a lipoprotein that had more protein than lipid. So we classify these lipoproteins again according to density. How much do they float or how much do they have the ability to sink in water? The first one we'll discuss is VLDLs, very low density lipoproteins. This would be the triglycerides. So we talked about the glycerol backbone with the three fatty acids. They have a high amount of lipid, lower amount of protein, and so they're going to float on water a lot more. LDLs, low density lipoproteins, still very light, but I'm sorry, still light, but not as much so as VLDLs. So your cholesterol will be considered an LDL. There's a high percentage of lipid or fat, um, higher percentage of lipid and fat than there are of protein, even though there's more protein content than the VLDLs, than the triglycerides. Then you have your high protein content lipoproteins. These are the HDLs. And when you listen to nutritionists, you listen to doctors, you listen to people who are trying to educate us on what to eat, what not to eat. It's the HDLs, the high density lipoprotein, that are always referred to as the quote unquote good fat. And that's because it has a higher density of protein than of lipid. The liver does control how your body controls and how your body creates cholesterol. So cholesterol is produced by the liver and then it's released into the bloodstream. Remember, I told you before that all animals make cholesterol. Plants do not make cholesterol. So if a person is trying to decrease the amount of blood cholesterol they have, my first thought would be decrease the amount of animal products that you're taking in and start eating a more plant-heavy diet so that you are decreasing how much cholesterol you're actually putting into the body versus how much your body is still making. All right, so your liver produces cholesterol, and then once it produces it, it is released into the bloodstream. Cholesterol in the body is used to make things like your bile salts. It also is used to make your steroid hormones. And that means that cholesterol is able to be excreted from the body. Your body decreases the amount of overall cholesterol it has by excreting it in the bile. Remember, bile is used to attach itself to the dietary fats that you use, that you eat, and then use that dietary fat. The bile connected to the dietary fat so that you can figure out how to use it. But then if you have too much, if your body is done with whatever it is in there, you can excrete it through the feces. So cholesterol can be excreted through the feces um, in the body. And that is a way that you can also decrease your cholesterol. So by eating high plant diet, you not only decrease the amount of cholesterol that's in the body by decreasing how much you're taking in, but you can also help to excrete the bile as waste by helping to push it along through the digestive system with that increased fiber found in plant foods. Your adipose tissue is where the cholesterol, the lipids are stored. And then once you need that extra energy, it can be released as triglycerides as your body needs it. So once your body has you have more blood, you have more triglycerides in your bloodstream, whether that's because you've just eaten a high-fat meal or your liver has uh, created triglycerides or you've liberated some triglycerides from your adipose tissue. Once that is free and it's floating around in the bloodstream, the triglycerides are broken down into their parts. That's the glycerol and the three fatty acids. It's broken down into those parts. Those then are able to float around through the bloodstream until it gets to the liver. Once it gets to the liver, the body can then make what it needs. It can make the same product, it can make new products. So your body can then make triglycerides, it can make more lipoproteins. Remember, your triglycerides are VLDL, your cholesterol is LDL, and then you have the ones that are higher protein content, which are the HDLs. You can use the fatty acids themselves, or it can make more fatty acids or different fatty acids, except those that we consider essential because they're essential because our liver cannot make them or convert them. You can make more cholesterol and you can make more phospholipids. So, what does a human body require with respect to lipids? The amount of lipids that a human body requires does vary depending on the human and depending on the stage of development that human is in. And human diets vary in how much lipid it contains. Also, keep in mind that not all of those lipids are healthy, just like not all of them are unhealthy. So, when you are choosing your own diet and you are trying to choose the healthiest diet, you want to make sure that you are using healthy fats. Fats that are going to do more to improve your health versus those that are unhealthy. Just because it's fat and just because it's consumed does not mean that it's unhealthy, right? Um, the amount of lipid that a person eats and the type determine whether or not it's healthy or not for a body. So, monounsaturated fats, remember we discussed it before, that means that it's not completely saturated with single bonds between the carbons. And in this case, it has one double bond between the carbons in that whole molecule. Monounsaturated fats are considered things like your avocados, fats from avocados, fat from olives. That's where we get your avocado oil and your olive oil. These are much healthier than your saturated fats, your butter or lard. But again, that does not mean that butter or lard are not healthy or that your body can't use them. But you want to, when you're talking about dietary fats, especially in Western society where we have access to more food on a regular basis and it's easier for us to get it, we want to use more of the monounsaturated fats than the saturated fats because of our lifestyles. Again, people have different lipid requirements based on their stage of life and their activity level. The more active a person is, the more fatty acids they need to use to help repair those uh, those cell membranes, the organelle membranes. The more fatty acids you may need to produce certain hormones, the more you may need to use to process other fats that you eat. And then if it, as a person gets older, your fatty acid levels change again according to where you are in your life. The fat intake, though, even though we want to be mindful of how much fat we are eating in our diets, it is still necessary for us to eat certain fats because we need fats not only um, to make bile and to make steroid hormones, but we also need to be able to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins are just like the name implies. These are vitamins that are fat-based, and in order for our bodies to take them in, they need to have a fat to bind into because oil and water doesn't mix. So if all we're eating is water-based products, which is in most cases much more beneficial to a body than lots and lots of fat, you still want to have some so that your body can take in those fat soluble vitamins and use those in your biochemical processes. So now let's talk about proteins. Proteins are broken down into amino acids. So the way proteins are built in a body, whether it's a human or another animal, it uses different amino acids and you put them together in chains. Those chains eventually fold themselves over into 3D groups, and that's how we make proteins. Proteins have lots and lots of different functions in the body. They can help to build new proteins, like your structural proteins, meaning proteins that help to build the structure of your cells, your tissues, your organs, your body. Proteins are used to make enzymes, those substances that are used to speed up or slow down processes in the body. Proteins are used to make non-steroid hormones. Your body makes antibodies from protein. So antibodies are proteins. The clotting factors, those factors that are used to help clot or to help patch up nicks in your blood vessels, are made up of proteins. And then the proteins that are floating around in your plasma that are used for things like transporting lipid-based products, maintaining osmotic balance in your bloodstream, all of those plasma proteins are made up of amino acid backbones, are made up of proteins. Your proteins can also give you energy, even though, excuse me, even though your body's primary energy use is carbohydrates that are broken down to glucose, you still use proteins as energy. So, proteins are first broken down into their amino acid backbones, and then the amino acids are broken down. So, the amine group from the amino acid, so this is the NH2 group is one of the distinctive areas of amino acids, and that's obviously where it gets its name. The amine group is removed through a process called deamination. D, without or the removal of, amination, the amino group. So deamination is the removal of the amino group from amino acids. These amino groups then are are conformed or changed to urea. Urea is one of the major waste products of urine. Urine is made up of urea, which is made up of the amino group from a deaminated amino acid. I hope that made sense for you. If not, play it back, run it slow so that you can hear it again. And now the portion of the amino acid that does not have the amino group is the deaminated portion, right? So you deaminated the amino acid, you took off the amino group, and now what's left is used in various pathways that make ATP. So once we take that amino acid, we remove the amino group, we can use the rest of it to make ATP in the citric acid cycle, for example. So again, if you've ever taken biochemistry or if you take biochemistry, the citric acid cycle is one of the cycles that you'll hear a lot about. And that is part of, it has many functions, but it is part of the pathway that it takes to make ATP. Excess amino acids can be converted to glucose or they can be converted to fat. So again, just like carbohydrates, if you eat too many, if you eat too much protein in your diet, your body uses what it needs, and the excess can be converted to adipose tissue or fat lipid that is put into adipose tissue. Right? So it's not just if you eat a lot of fat, that'll make you fat. If you eat a lot of carbohydrate and protein, that can also be converted to fat if your body doesn't need it in that moment. All right, remember your adipose tissue is potential energy used for energy later. Where do we get protein from? When we're talking about getting protein in the diet, most of the time we talk about animal products, so animal meat. Remember, meat is basically the muscle from an animal, right? Meat is muscle from an animal. So proteins can come from animal sources like your animal meats or animal muscle. You can get it from fish, cows. What else do people eat? Lamb, poultry. So that's chicken and turkey. Cheese is a byproduct from an animal, right? So we take the breast milk from, usually it's cow in our society, but you can also eat goat cheese and other cheeses. Any animal that makes milk, you can make a cheese from that milk. Yes, even human. Excuse me. So cheese has a high amount of protein. Nuts are high protein. Nuts are plant products that carry a lot of protein. They also carry a lot of lipids, but they can be healthy lipids depending on the nut. Milk, remember, milk is what's used to make cheese. Eggs, eggs are high in protein. Even though they're also high in cholesterol, they're high in protein. Legumes, so beans and peas, they have high amounts of protein, even though the protein content is less than that of meat. People who eat lots of beans, like here in New Orleans, we tend to eat a lot of beans, especially red beans, on a regular basis. You are getting protein from those beans. The body needs 20 different types of amino acids in order to make all the proteins that our cells make for all of the reasons that we do. Again, we have structural proteins, we have plasma proteins, we have antibodies, we have non-steroid hormones, etc. All of those are different types of proteins that our body makes and uses. And it takes 20 different types of amino acids in order to build all of those different proteins. 12 of the 20 amino acids can be synthesized by the body. So, if you have one type of amino acid, your body can actually make 12 of the 20 that we need. These are called non-essential. Remember, essential refers to whether or not the body can synthesize it. So, 12 of the 20 are non-essential amino acids. 8 of them cannot be synthesized by the body in any way. So these are considered essential, meaning we have to eat a diet that is varied and that has these other proteins in them that our body does not make because we still need them, right? So we need all 20 in order for our bodies to function properly. All 20 of those amino acids must be present at the same time in order for protein synthesis to occur. In order for your body to make proteins, to build structures, your body has to have all 20 amino acids at the same time, even the essential ones. So that means that you need to be eating a diet that is varied so that you're getting all of these proteins, all of these amino acids in, so your body can continue to build and heal you. Even if one of those amino acids is missing, any protein that requires that particular one will not be produced. So if that is a protein needed to help your blood balance, how much water stays in your blood, or if it's a structural protein, if you don't have the proper amino acid, that thing cannot be built. And that's where illness comes from, or that's part of where illness comes from. When you're talking about proteins, there are two categories. There's complete proteins and incomplete proteins. Complete proteins are those that contain adequate amounts of the essential amino acids. These are typically found in animal products, so your meat, your milk, your eggs. Incomplete proteins, for one, I really dislike that they call it low quality proteins. I don't like that, but we'll go with what it says. So, incomplete proteins don't have all of the essential proteins that your body needs, right? So, it does not contain adequate amounts of essential amino acids. So, those people who are vegan, or eat high plant diets, don't eat very many meat products or animal products, if any at all, they're getting incomplete proteins. And so they have to be very, very mindful to vary their diet so that they are getting a full complement of proteins so that all of their structures can be built by their bodies. Certain combinations of plant proteins can provide uh, the necessary diversity of amino acids. So even though some proteins are considered incomplete proteins, they can become complete when you put them in combination with others. So if you eat a lot of beans and you eat it with rice, that then becomes more complete protein. So again, here in New Orleans, we love a good plate of beans and rice, especially on Mondays. That's the tradition, right? That would be considered a good combination of plant-based proteins where we are getting more of those essential amino acids than if we were to just eat beans or rice. On the slide, what you'll see is the names of all of the amino acids that our bodies need, all 20 amino acids that our bodies need. Now, I'm not going to require you to memorize these, but pay attention to them because you may see these as you move further into your career or your education for your career because these are extremely important. If you've ever been a gym rat, if you ever start using supplements to help you build muscle and to perform better in the gym, then you may have actually seen some of these because these are the substances that they will sell in like your branched chain amino acid formulas or your pre or post, especially your post-workout formulas. So that is what these are. You may have heard the term tryptophan. Tryptophan is that amino acid that causes people to be sleepy. So, when someone eats a turkey sandwich, you'll oftentimes get really sleepy, and that's because of the high tryptophan content. You see the E on the side of it, that means that these are essential amino acids. So, by eating turkey, you may be getting more of that essential amino acid tryptophan, but part of the what tryptophan does is it calms and relaxes the body. And that is why those, like after you've eaten certain foods, in some instances, you get sleepy, right? So that is an example of an amino acid that you may have heard or seen before. Lysine. For those of you who either have experienced um, herpes outbreaks, especially like cold sores. Remember, cold sores are a type of herpes. You may have taken a supplement or even given a medication that has a high lysine, um, a high lysine content. Lysine helps suppress the breakthrough or the breakthrough of those outbreaks, right? And so you have heard of some of these, but it really depends on the context. If you've ever heard of MSG, MSG is a seasoning used in lots of Asian cooking, especially. The G, monosodium glutamate, has to do with glutamine or glutamic acid, right? So you've experienced some of these before. Again, just be mindful as you move through your life, your days. Once you see these, you'll actually know that they are part of the 20 amino acids that a body needs. So let's talk nitrogen balance. So in a healthy adult, protein is continuously being built up and broken down, right? That's the balance. We're going to build some things up, we're going to break some things down. Overall, gain, how much protein is taken in or being built up, should be equal to overall loss. How much protein is being broken down and how much protein is being excreted by the body. That is called dynamic equilibrium. So, equilibrium, things are equal and balanced. Dynamic, things are moving. So, the idea behind dynamic equilibrium is that Even though you constantly have things being built up and brought in, you also have things being broken down and excreted, that movement, that net movement should still be equal. You should have as much leaving and breaking down as you do as coming in and being built up. Since proteins have a high percentage of nitrogen, remember that amine group that had the NH2? That N is the nitrogen, all right? And so proteins have a high percentage of that nitrogen. Dynamic equilibrium leads to a state of nitrogen balance. So, how much nitrogen is in a body at a given time? It should be balanced if you have an equal amount loss versus gain. All right, so that's what that statement means. So now let's talk about negative nitrogen balance versus positive nitrogen balance. Remember, in anatomy, in the body, in science, negative or positive does not necessarily mean good and bad. In this case, it absolutely does not have to do with good and bad, or at least not in the way that we think. All right. So negative nitrogen balance develops from starvation. It means that your body is excreting more nitrogen than that person is taking in. So, of course, starvation is not positive. It is a negative, but I don't want you to look at negative as bad, right? So, again, negative nitrogen balance means that you are excreting more than you are taking in. So, the positive nitrogen balance would be this opposite of that. Developing children need to take in more protein than they excrete. Pregnant women need to take in more protein than they excrete. So do athletes that are in training. So those of you who are, you're in season right now, the softball team, baseball team, basketball team, those of you that are in training right now, you need more protein than you are excreting or than you're using. So positive nitrogen balance means we are taking in more than we excreting. So any person who is building a body, whether you are a child growing your own body, you are pregnant growing a new human, or you're an athlete who is constantly repairing tissue and building muscle for your event, you need to take in more protein or more nitrogen than you are excreting to to help you to perform in that stage of your life. Besides supplying essential amino acids, proteins provide nitrogen, which we just discussed, and other elements for producing non-essential amino acids, and certain other nitrogenous substances that are not protein. So other substances that contain nitrogen that are not considered proteins. Not all nitrogens are a part of proteins, right? But all proteins have nitrogen. Dietary protein intake will vary by body size, metabolic rate, and nitrogen balance condition. So, how big your body is, how fast your metabolism is working, and what state your body is in, what state your nitrogen balance is in. Let me go back. Meaning, are you in starvation? Are you a growing child? Are you a pregnant woman or an athlete in training? That is the nitrogen balance condition. All of that will vary the dietary protein intake. Typically, for the average person, your daily protein intake as recommended should be 10% of a person's diet. So, excuse me, 10% of a person's diet. So if you eat a pound of food a day, of course, we're going to eat more than that, but if you eat a pound of food a day, then a tenth of a pound should be protein. All right, it should be protein. Most people consume 60 to 150 grams of protein per day. So that is 2 to 5 ounces of protein a day. 2 to 5 ounces. That's not very much. So again, that is way more than, I'm sorry, that is, let me rephrase that. 2 to 5 ounces is way less than most of us are actually eating. All right, so deficiency of protein leads to tissue wasting and a decline in plasma proteins. If you're not eating enough protein, it doesn't mean that you have to eat a lot of animal products, but you have to eat um, food that has adequate amount of proteins in them. If you don't eat enough protein in the diet, then you'll start wasting your tissues. Your body will basically start breaking down your own proteins, your own muscle tissue, in order to get the amino acids it needs. It'll also decrease the amount of plasma proteins that you have. Those proteins in the bloodstream that are used as for things like keeping the water balance inside your bloodstream, being able to transport lipids from one place to another. That will also decrease. And that can cause things like a change in or decrease in the osmotic pressure that is controlled by plasma, which can cause edema. So don't eat enough protein. You can get nutritional edema, meaning that you don't have other things going on in the body that will lead to edema. What is leading to the edema is the lack of adequate amounts of protein in the body. So use this chart to help you understand the difference between your macronutrients, the sources of those macronutrients, how much calorie can be obtained from each of the macronutrients. Remember, your lipids will give you twice as much or has the potential to give you twice as much energy per gram of lipid versus a gram of carbohydrate and a gram of protein. This is how your body uses these things. This is what happens if we have too much of each of these. And this is what happens if we have too little of each of these. Notice in the excesses, you have obesity in all three of these categories. Because remember, um, all of these can be converted to fat. So again, just because a person if a person is decreasing how much fat they're eating, that does not necessarily mean that they won't become obese if they're still eating extremely high amounts of protein or they're eating high amounts of carbohydrates. So let's talk energy expenditure. Energy expenditure, how your body uses and spends energy. So, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are all used in the body to make energy for your cells to function. Deficiencies in energy can cause your body to consume your structural molecules. For example, your body can start breaking down, can start consuming your own muscle tissue in order to provide the nutrients it needs. If this happens enough, you can consume enough of your body to lead to death, especially if we start getting into the more important proteins in our bodies. Excuse me. Energy values of the food. So calories are used to measure how much potential energy in a certain food. So again, when we look at the calorie content of food, we're talking about how much energy can our body extract from a certain amount of that food. Calories are used to measure heat. Remember when we first talked about calories, we used that as a unit of heat. And that's because as a body is liberating or breaking those bonds to release energy, a byproduct of that is heat. And so calories are a measurement of heat energy, potential heat energy that comes from certain foods. So Carbohydrates gives you 4.1 calories per gram of carbohydrates. Proteins give you 4.1 calories per gram of carbohydrate, I'm sorry, of protein. And lipids give you 9.5 calories per gram of lipid. So, as mentioned a few times before, lipids contain twice as much calorie, or it can produce twice as much energy as carbohydrates or proteins. So, the way I said it before is also something to think about. Lipids have twice as many calories as carbohydrates or proteins, right? And that means that if you eat more lipids, you can get twice as much energy from it. But that also means that if you're not using that energy, now you have twice as much energy being stored as adipose. If you don't use it. And this is why people will say, if you eat fats, you'll get fat. That's because it has the potential to give you twice as many calories per gram than the other two. The bomb collimator is the machine that is actually used as kind of the gold standard that's used to measure calories in a thing. All right, so that is the gold standard. I've never seen one of these. These are, I guess, used in research purposes, but just know that this is sort of the gold standard of how calories are measured. We're going to stop the video here. We'll start the next video with basal metabolic rate or BMR and energy requirements.